Okay, everybody, welcome to this discussion, The True Origin of Christmas. I'm interrupting my series on the history of Christian Zionism just to throw this in there, since it is, in fact, the Christmas season. And I thought, to get into the Christmas spirit, I might as well have a nice, pleasant Scrooge discussion about one of my favorite holidays. Actually, Christmas was, when I was a kid, my favorite holiday. I would make a calendar up and count down the days, 30 days, 20 days, 10 days, I would get all excited. Now I could give a frog's fat ass. Not only because I've discovered the fraudulence of the whole thing, the Christian religion, but also because it's just so disgusting, guys. The phoniness of it all, the hypocrisy, the commercialization of the whole goddamn Jewification situation. Uh, it just sickens me. But, anyways, what are the true origins of Christmas? Most people will tell you that it's a celebration of Jesus' birthday, of course. But is it really? Is that really the origin of this holiday? In fact, does it have anything to do with Christianity, with Christ's alleged birth? Again, we don't even know that the friggin' guy existed, right? Nevertheless, though, is that really the historical origins of this day? Obviously, the Easter holiday, accompanied by its preceding 40-day period of fasting for Catholics and Eastern Orthodox, is of purely pagan origin, being nothing but a springtime fertility feast, complete with the bunny and the egg fertility symbols. Um, that festival in ancient times, dating back long before the time of Christianity, was preceded by a 40-day fasting period, right? That's where that comes from. There's nothing in the New Testament to relate that to, the 40-day Lent season. That's all complete freaking horseshit. Um, there's nothing in the Christian mythos that you could say that was derived from, like most everything else in the Catholic Church. It's just tradition that they incorporated into the cult. But often those traditions were adopted from paganism, right? Something that Christians are supposed to be opposed to. But what about Christmas? Is this nothing but a corrupted pagan festival as well that was later assigned Christian connotations, just like Easter and so many other friggin' traditions that have come down the pike, like Halloween, obviously a pagan holiday? Is Christmas just another one of them? Well, let's have a look. We read in Werner Keller's book, The Bible as History, the following admission. It states December 25th is referred to in documents as Christmas Day in AD 324 for the first time. 324 is an interesting year because that's when Mr. Constantine started to step into the fore and declare Christianity as the official religion of the empire, right? It was also at this time that he declared the Trinity an official doctrine. Well, actually, it started as a binity, father and son. It later developed, later in that century, with the Council of Constantinople. It developed into a trinity with the Holy Spirit now being declared as a third person of this triune. But it started under Constantine. Um, he also introduced the first Sunday law to make Sunday the new Christian holiday. And so it is with Christmas. It appeared at this very time for the first time in writing. This quote went on. Under the Roman Emperor Justinian, AD 527 to 565, it was recognized as an official holiday. An old Roman festival played a major part in the choice of this particular day, an old Roman festival. So it is an adoption of a pagan holiday into the Christian world. December 25th, it went on to say, in ancient Rome was the Dies Natali Invictus, part of the Sol Invictus Mithras cult, right? The birthday of the unconquered, the day of the winter solstice, and at the same time in Rome, the last day of the Saturnalia, which had long since degenerated into a week of unbridled carnival. It was a day of wild, orgiastic partying, right? That's the Christmas heritage for you. That's the history of it. So here are Christians by the millions, yea, billions, celebrating a goddamn pagan holiday, just like Easter and on it goes, right? Which they claim to be opposed to, and all the while thinking that it is a Christian holiday. No, it isn't. Never was, until Constantine came along and first initiated it. But again, that's how it is with the observance of Sunday as the Christian Sabbath and so many other practices and beliefs that crept in the early centuries. Baptized paganism, as some like to call it. So we can see that the date of December 25th certainly comes from this pagan holiday. But is there any way to connect December 25th with Christ's birthday? No, absolutely not. The Gospels don't give any attention to the date or the time of Christ's birth at all. You can't pin it down at all. You might narrow it down to the fall sometime because it talks about the sheep out in pasture. So it was the fall. It certainly wasn't the winter or the winter solstice. But the Bible doesn't place any significance on the date of Christ's birth anyway, like it's some important holiday that needs to be remembered and celebrated. What a bunch of horse shit. The only emphasis it places is on Christ's death, burial, and resurrection. But we don't even know for sure when that was, right? It's assumed it was in the spring, but we don't know. It says it was on Passover. So, yeah, probably, late winter, early spring sometime. But there's no way to nail the date down because we don't know the year that he died. So we can't trace back and nail that down. But again, even if we could, that wouldn't mean jack shit, would it now? It would just mean that was maybe when Judas Christus died, the real life character for Christ. But once you realize he was a goddamn insurrectionist, what cause for celebration is that now? Unless you're a Jew. Anyway, says the workbook encyclopedia, the exact date of Christ's birth is not known. The early Christians did not celebrate his birth because they considered the celebration of anyone's birth to be a pagan custom. Anyway, regarding the alleged relationship between December 25th and Christ's birthday, the Bible as History states, the book called The Bible as History, meteorologists as well as historians and astronomers have something of importance to contribute to this question of fixing the date of the birth of Christ. According to St. Luke, quote, and there were in the same country shepherds abiding in the field, keeping watch over the flock by night, according to Luke 2:8. Meteorologists have made exact recordings of the temperature at Hebron. This spot in the southern highlands of Judah exhibits the same climatic conditions as Bethlehem, which is not far distant. The temperature readings show over a period of 3 months that the incidence of frost is as follows: December 2.8 degrees, January 1.6 degrees, February 0.1 degrees, blah, blah, blah. The first 2 months have also the greatest rainfall in the year, approximately 6 inches in December and nearly 8 inches in January. It's trying to nail down, the time that it mentions about the shepherds. According to all existing information, it says, the climate of Palestine has not changed appreciably in the last 2,000 years. Consequently, modern meteorological observations can be taken as a basis. At Christmas time, Bethlehem is in the grip of frost, and in the promised land, no cattle would have been in the fields in that sort of temperature range. This fact is borne by a remark in the Talmud to the effect that in that neighborhood, the flocks were put out to grass in March and brought in again at the beginning of November. They remained out in the open for almost 8 months. Around Christmas time nowadays, both animals and shepherds are under cover in Palestine. In other words, it couldn't possibly have been in December, right? It had to be earlier. What St. Luke tells us, it says, points therefore to the birth of Jesus having taken place before the onset of winter. So yeah, late summer, early fall, September, October, certainly not in frickin' December. So there's no way to make a connection between December 25th and Christ's alleged birthday, going by the gospel accounts, right? Assuming there's any fucking truth to that horseshit. Anyways, so, out the window goes that. So where does it come from? Once again, we've already seen it comes from goddamn paganism, like so much else that's crept into the Christian world. Is there any way of nailing down, at least with a ballpark date, the time that Christ was supposed to have been born, again, according to the gospel accounts, right? In the book of Luke, we read that the father of John the Baptist was Zacharias, and that he was a priest who served at the temple in Jerusalem. He was of the priestly course of Abiah, according to Luke 1:5. While serving at the temple, he was informed by an angel that his wife was to have a son who was to be named John. After this, Zechariah furnished the days of his ministration, and that he, quote, departed to his own house, according to verse 23. And after those days, quote, his wife Elizabeth had conceived, according to verse 24. The names of the different courses of priests that served at the temple are given in 1 Chronicles 24, 1-19. Abiah, or Abijah, was the 8th course, we're told. According to Josephus, each one of these courses served at the temple for 1 week, the first course serving the first week of Nisan, the month of Nisan, in the spring, and then each course in its own order. Thus, the course of Abijah naturally would have served the 8th week in the rotation. The 8th week from Nisan 1, leaving out the week of Passover, when all of the priests served, would have been Iyar 27 to Sivan the 5th. He returned home shortly after this, and his wife then conceived, we're told. This would have been about the middle of June, according to this reckoning. So now we're dealing with, late spring, early summer. If we add 9 months to this date, though, the normal time for the gestation of a baby, a human baby in the womb, John the Baptist would have been born about the middle of March in the spring, shortly before the Passover. Christ is said to have been conceived about 6 months after this time, according to Luke 1:24-31. So this would suggest that Christ was conceived about the middle of December, if you go by this reckoning. But of course, it doesn't fit with the gospel record that the shepherds were out. It was too cold then. It'd be a frost, right? So in typical Bible fashion, you have major contradictions. Anyway, and as I pointed out in my series on contradictions in the New Testament, there are massive contradictions across the board in the story of the life of Christ, concentrated more heavily there than in any other part of the Bible. And most of those contradictions are themselves concentrated in the last few days of his life, in the account of his death, burial, and resurrection. Imagine that, guys. This is supposed to be the most important part of the Bible. It would be one thing if the contradictions existed, more in the Old Testament or in some of the epistles, but the gospel record was perfectly consistent with itself and with the historical record. That would be a different story, wouldn't it? You could write off those other things and say, well, this is the most important part. God wanted to make sure he got this right. But no, that's the part of the Bible that has the most contradictions. Gotta love it, man. So anyway, who exactly was born on December 25th? No matter which biblical reckoning we go by, Christ had to have been born either sometime in September, October, or in mid-December, not late December. So who was born on December 25th that this pagan celebration commemorated, that was later brought into the Christian church? In the book History of Rome by Michael Grant, we read these interesting comments. There was a pagan belief during this same epoch, early centuries of the Christian era, that much more nearly competed with Christ for the control of the Western world. This was the cult of the sun, or Sol Invictus Mithras, which was revered by millions of the inhabitants of the Roman Empire, and its religion for a time even became the state worship, or the state religion, Sol Invictus Mithras. In the 4th century, of course, it switched over to Christianity, but for the longest time, the state religion was this sun cult. In Rome, the divinity of the sun came very early on, and then, or the admiration thereof, and then centuries afterwards, in the superb dome of Hadrian's Pantheon, the central opening, surrounded by star-like rosettes, represented the solar orb. And you have this same kind of imagery, well, all over the Catholic world, right? In one cathedral after another, but especially right there in the Vatican, right in Rome. All of this pagan imagery. Just look at the phallic symbol, right? The obelisk. What the hell does that have to do with Christianity? And look how it is centered in right in the middle of a friggin' solar disk, right? St. Peter's Square. Holy shit. Oh yeah, that's real Christian now, isn't it? It's fucking pagan, guys. It's right out of ancient Hyksos Egyptian, cultism or occultism, which Freemasonry is so big on, right? Along with Rosicrucianism and on it goes. Anyway, before long, the Emperor Aurelian had established a massive temple of the unconquerable sun as the central and focal point of the entire religious system of the state before Christianity was declared the official religion. The birthday of the god was to be on December 25th, and this, transformed into Christmas Day, was one of the heritages that Christianity owed to the sun god's cult. There you go. It turns out, though, guys, that December 25th was observed even before Rome. It was inherited directly from Rome. But Rome itself inherited this practice going back to a much earlier time, to ancient Sumer and Babylon, where the god Tammuz was worshipped as the son of the sun god Nimrod, according to the mythos of, the religion of the Sumerians and the Babylonians. Nimrod, when he died, his soul went into the sun. And so now the sun was worshipped because that's where Nimrod's soul had dwelt. And then it was claimed that his widowed wife became impregnated by him through the sun's rays, right? She was divinely conceived, and she gave birth to Tammuz, the son of God, literally, the son of the sun god, Nimrod. This is what was claimed. She was a temple prostitute and probably got knocked up in the temple, by one of her little flings. But nevertheless, it was claimed that this baby was divinely conceived by Nimrod's spirit dwelling in the sun, right? And so, according to the folklore, Tammuz was born on December 25th. And so that's the ultimate origin. And he was called the Son of God, right? How interesting. So you got to love it, guys. Christians observe Christ's birthday on the day of the son of the birthday of the son of the sun god, right? And they go to church every week on the day of the sun, which ultimately is Nimrod. That's the father of, the son of God, whose birthday they observe on Christmas. They go to church, though, every day or every week on the day of that son of God's father, Nimrod, right? That's his day, the day of the sun. Ultimately, that's where that came from, the day of the sun, Sunday. It wasn't just Sol Invictus Mithras. This was a tradition that had been kept by many other ancient cultures that was transferred down through the centuries. It's fascinating, and maybe I'll do a series on that sometime. If you look at the mythologies of all world religions, it doesn't matter. They change the names of the gods and they're depicted in different ways, but the essential elements are all the same. There's a central deity. They have, even though they might have multiple deities, a pantheon of gods, there's always one central big man on campus deity. And usually he had a female companion, and they had a child together, a divine child. And usually the divine child was half human or in the case of the Christian version, fully human and fully God, which of course is fucking bullshit. But nevertheless, I mean, how is that even possible? How could you be fully one and fully the other at the same time? But in Magic Yahweh land, anything's possible, right? Fucking joke. But you just gotta love it, though, that the whole thing is pagan all the way through, right? And yet, Christians have this sacred connotation to it. Oh no, we're remembering Jesus. Knock it off. What's to remember about a first century fucking insurrectionist to begin with? Anyways, it's pretty interesting though, because all the while that they're supposed to be, Christians are supposed to be so opposed to sun worship, right? And yet here they are observing the son of the sun god's birthday on December 25th and going to church on the day of the sun, blah, 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 blah. Interestingly, in the book of Malachi, chapter 4, verse 2, there's a passage that Christians interpret to be referring to Christ, which, it's bullshit, but it has nothing to do with Christ. Nevertheless, though, they do apply it to Christ. And it's interesting, though, because the character in this verse is called the Son of Righteousness, S-U-N. Interesting. So if you want to apply that to Christ, well, yeah, then you just turned him into a sun deity, right? Well, guess what? I covered this a while back. I think it was called Yahweh the Sun God. I did a series on that. There are swarms of passages in the Old Testament that apply the solar theme to Mr. Yahweh himself. So you're right in line with where you should be, Christians that are so enamored with sun worship on Sunday and observing the birthday of the sun god. You're right in line with it because your Yahweh and Yahweh Jr. are both solar deities as well. Christ is described in the book of Revelation as shining with the brightness of the sun. The same is said about Yahweh, that he rides in his chariot across the heavens. That's the solar deity that is depicted in all ancient pagan art, riding in his solar chariot across the sky. You gotta love it. Anyway, further interesting comments about December 25th being connected with sun worship are found in the book Myth and Mystery, an introduction to the pagan religions of the biblical world by Jack Finnegan. Here's what he said. But the worship of the sun god continued widely throughout the empire, and under Aurelian, AD 270 to 275, the cult was restored to its former high estate. In the year 274, Aurelian declared the god, now called Deus Sol Invictus, or god of the Sol Invictus cult, right? The official deity of the Roman Empire. This is just a century before Christianity was now declared as the official religion of the empire. And they just took all of these pagan celebrations, all of these pagan deities, and renamed them, or almost all of them, with Christian names, right? They kept the calendar the same. They just changed it over to Christian names. And they still worship the same statue that had been worshipped for centuries prior to that time as Jupiter. Now they called it Peter. To this day, the statue of St. Peter in St. Peter's Square, or well, in the cathedral, the main cathedral, St. Peter's Cathedral. That same statue was the original Jupiter statue that was, worshipped and adored by the pagan Romans. It's now called St. Peter, but it was worshipped by the pagans as Jupiter. You got to fucking love it, guys. So many times over the centuries has the feet of this statue been kissed by gullible fucks. First, the pagans, and then later the Christians, thinking that somehow it was going to bring them a blessing. That you can't count the toes on the feet anymore. They're all worn off from people's lips kissing it over the centuries. That's it, nothing else. It hasn't been buffed or polished, just from people kissing the feet of the thing. First by the pagans as Jupiter, later by the Christians as Peter. You gotta be fucking kidding me, man. You see how mindless this goddamn religion is? How disgusting it is? It's so pathetic. Look at the low level of mentality it reduces otherwise, intelligent people to, right? Anyway, this quote goes on. Aurelian built a splendid temple of the sun in Rome and set the sun's birthday celebration to December 25th, the date then accepted for the winter solstice. But But of course, it just revived an ancient practice. December 25th had been observed by many other cultures long before this. It goes on. In the time of Constantine, the cult of Deus Sol Invictus was still at its height, and the portrait of the sun god was on the coins of Constantine. Likewise, it must have been at this time, and with the intent to transform the significance of an existing sacred date, that the birthday of Jesus, which had been celebrated in the East on January 6th, was now placed in Rome on December 25th to conform with the already observed pagan holiday, right? To make Christianity more appealing to the pagans. The date of the birthday celebration of Sol Invictus, December 25th. This date appears in a list of dates probably compiled in AD 336 and published in the Roman city calendar, edited by Philoculus for the year 354. So by the mid to late 4th century, this was fully adopted now, fully in place, and became an established tradition which has been with us ever since. Constantine the Great, again, played a major role in this development in what is today called, Christmas by Orthodox Christianity. In the year 324, he was the first to enact legislation that made Sunday a day of rest, as we talked about not too long ago. He also officially declared the doctrine of the Trinity, also, which I talked about recently at the Council of Nicaea around the same time. He had only claimed to be a Christian for political reasons, right? He was a sun worshiper till his dying day. And all Christians, particularly Catholics and Orthodox, Eastern and Greek Orthodox, they are more specifically sun worshippers because of all the solar iconography in their cult, right? Pictures of Jesus show a halo over his head, which represents the solar disk. Mary as well has the halo or the beams of sun rays shining from behind her head, which is what the Statue of Liberty is, right? It's the solar frickin' goddess. Be it Mary or whatever other fucking name you want to attach, it's still the solar, feminine deity. Listen to what William Durant wrote in his big, thick volume, The Story of Civilization, along this line. He said, Christ was assimilated to the religion and philosophical traditions of the Hellenistic mind. Now the pagan world, even the anti-Semitic world, could accept Christ as its own. You see what was happening? They wouldn't be able to accept this new religion and its founder, Christ, these pagans, unless it got de-Jewified enough so it looked like their own Gentile religion, Sol Invictus Mithras, right? So they had to change the window dressing. They had to have Christ with a halo, Mary with sunbeams coming from behind her, right? That made it acceptable. That de-Jewified it, at least on the surface, to make it acceptable. This is how the Roman Empire was replaced by the Vatican, right? Pagan Rome became papal Rome, and this is how the first century insurrectionist movement ultimately did take over the Roman Empire. It didn't happen in the time frame they wanted. It didn't happen in the way that they wanted, but it did happen. And this is how it came about. Anyway, and so Christmas played a big role in this. The adoption of this Christmas holiday goes back to this very time, along with the Trinity and the immortal soul doctrine and Sunday observance, and on and on it goes. Anyway, this quote goes on to say, Christianity did not destroy paganism. It adopted it. Which is funny because, the early Christians were going around doing the work of the Jews, destroying pagan temples and smashing pagan idols. And yet all the while, they're adopting and embracing pagan fucking practices. You know, worshiping pagan statues, just changing the name. Anyways, this quote goes on. The Greek mind, dying, came to a transmigrated life in the theology and liturgy of the church, the Catholic Church. The Greek mysteries passed down into the impressive mystery of the Mass. It was passed on, through the Mass. Other pagan cultures contributed to the systematic result. From Egypt came the idea of a divine trinity. From Egypt, the adoration of the mother and child, Hyksos in Egypt, right? From Phrygia came the worship of the Great Mother. The Mithraic ritual so closely resembled the Eucharistic sacrifice of the Mass that Christian fathers charged the devil with inventing these similarities to mislead frail minds. That still goes on today. A lot of Christians claim, when you point out all the similarities between Christianity and pagan cults that long preceded Christianity, they'll say that was the devil copying it in advance, which presents an even bigger problem for them, because now they're attributing to the devil omniscience, which is supposed to be a quality that only Yahweh possesses, right? But the devil, if he was plagiarizing Christianity in advance, he would have to know the future like Yahweh, right? See how they fuck themselves over without even realizing it when they make up these fucking excuses to explain away the obvious fact that Christianity was plagiarizing, right? The whole fucking Bible is plagiarism, not just, the New Testament, the Old Testament as well. But anyway, he ended off by saying Christianity was the last great creation of the ancient pagan world. Well, not that they created it, but the pagan world was adopted by it anyways. The Jews are the ones that created it. You've got people like that Atwill character that are trying to make it out to look like the Roman Empire created the Christ myth. Oh, cut the fucking shit. It's a Jew creation, for Christ's sakes. Anyway, in the book of Christmas folklore, Tristram Coffin wrote these remarks in regards to the origin of the Christmas tree. He said, most people have heard that the Christmas tree originates in the Tannenbaum and is some sort of vestige of Teutonic vegetation worship. This is partially true, he said. However, the custom of using pine trees and other evergreen trees ceremonially was well established at the Roman Saturnalia, even earlier in Egypt. And it goes back, to ancient Babylon as well. But nevertheless, it's a pagan practice, right? The erection of and the decoration of a chopped down pine tree in a public square, or as a religious symbol. It long predates what became known as the Christmas celebration. Alexander Hislop, in his classic mid-19th century work called The Two Babylons, further had this to say: the Christmas tree, now so common among us, was equally common in pagan Rome and pagan Egypt. In Egypt, that tree was the palm tree. In Rome, it was the fir. The palm tree denoting the pagan Messiah as Hal Tamar, the fir referring to him as Baal Berith. Sounds like B'nai Berith, doesn't it? Anyway, the mother of Adonis, the sun god and great mediatorial divinity, was mystically said to have been changed into a tree, and when in that state, to have brought forth her divine son. If the mother was a tree, the son must have been recognized as the man, the branch, and the branch, quote unquote, is a term that's applied to Christ according to an alleged prophecy, mentioned in several places in the Old Testament, particularly in the book of Isaiah. Interesting that that title, though, is applied to Christ. Anyway, he went on to say, Hislop, and this entirely accounts for the putting of the Yule log into the fire on Christmas Eve and the appearance of the Christmas tree the next morning. Tree worship was very common among the ancients. Says the book, Festivals, Holy Days, and Saints' Days by Ethel Erlin, quote, the Christmas tree recapitulates the idea of tree worship, gilded nuts and balls symbolizing the sun, the balls you hang from the tree. All of the festivals of the winter solstice have been absorbed into Christmas Day. The use of holly and mistletoe to the Druidic ceremonies, the Christmas tree to the honors paid to Odin's sacred fur. So as you can see, all ancient cultures had their various versions of this. It all got incorporated into Christmas, having nothing to do